Well, it is Zach Martin here on New HD, NEW HD New York, where rock lives, with Screamin Jack Novak. Does NEW HD New York ring a bell with you, Screamin Jack Novak?
Well, I'm thinking of WNEW FM and like Scott Muni
Yes,
and
and now that you
Paul
mention it,
Miller and all the greats.
let me just tell you. On Friday afternoons on NEW HD New York, New HD New York, we have Charlie Kendall at 3 o'clock, followed by Scott Meany's Ticket to Ride, followed by Charlie Kendall's Metal Shop. And on Friday, March 3rd, when we're recording this right now, just so everybody knows, and I think you'll like this, Screamin' Jack Novak of Fastest Land Animal, one of my favorite bands, who I equate to the Beatles and the Ramones, as we've said in the past.
High
Um,
praise speed.
Not only do we have uh, Dave Herman's Psychedelic Snack at 4:20, along with Charlie Kendall, but we have Scott Meany's Ticket to Ride featuring Jack Hayward, John Entwistle, and Rick Wakeman.
Cool.
Then it's Metal Shop, hosted by Pat St. John,
Pat St.
featuring
John.
Nirvana. And then Scott Muni, classic Scott Muni, is back with an interview of Geddy Lee of Rush from 1991, September of 1991, as they talked about Roll the Bones. That's all happening on New HD New York.
Wow. This is like bringing me back to my childhood.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all about, Screaming Jack. I don't know if anybody told you this, but part of the mission of New HD New York and New HD Radio is to create job opportunities for people on the autistic spectrum and with additional needs. They can broadcast from the sanctity of their home, like we're doing right here. And it doesn't matter where you live in this world of ours, as long as you have a computer, your microphone, set up at home like you do where you are, you can be on the radio and you can be a radio star. So, Screaming Jack Novak, Fastest Land Animals, please tell all your friends about us. We're playing your song. You can download the New HD Radio app. I mean, we've come a long way since the last time we've spoken.
That's wonderful. And yeah, you guys are like a real grown up radio station.
Yeah, how about that? Let's talk about Fastest Land Animal and the song next to me from your album, East Coast, West Coast, In Between, which I love. Who came up with the idea for that album title, Screaming Jack Novak?
Guilty as charged. The idea is that this album, this is our second album as Fastest Land Animal. The first one we did right at the beginning and the height of the pandemic. We were all stranded at home. We couldn't play any gigs because there were no gigs. But we all had the benefit of having like pretty good home recording setups and home recording studios where we each were at home. I'm East Coast. I live in New York. And our bass player, guitar player, and also our producer, Don Gilmore, they're out on the West Coast. And our drummer lives in between. He lives in Houston, Texas. So we did the first album remotely. We ended up recording all our parts separately and gluing it together at the end. But we were able to monitor and listen to in real time what all the other guys were doing and talk about things and rearrange things and come up with new ideas and new ways of playing parts. And then we would all go on with our lives, come back together the next day and settle on the parts and build it from the foundation up, drum parts, then bass on top of that, guitars and vocals and keyboards. But that worked out so well for us. Just it was a real efficient way to work. Typically we, like any other band, you'd go rent out a actual recording studio. You'd all basically move in there for 6-8 weeks, whatever it is, and record the whole album, and you'd be done. Then you'd all go home. Then you get ready and go on tour. This way was a lot easier in a lot of ways. I mean, there's no substitute for a band getting together and workshopping things and playing live face to face in the same room. But this was a real, almost easy way to work. So we decided for the second album, we were no longer in lockdown, but we were all still living where we all still live. And so let's just do it again. And just get it's better to just get the album written, recorded, and released and not worry about logistics. And this kind of alleviates the need to worry about logistics, because there really are none. You just have to agree, let's all get together tomorrow morning and work for a few hours, and get together when your parts are done, and that kind of thing. So we did it again.
Well, I think that's a smart way to go about the business. Over the past couple of years, the remote technology has improved dramatically. Even the system that we're using now has built-in technology to account for latency. The recording, sometimes with the latency, is always a problem, but they've overcome that dramatically.
Yeah, we used a program called Audio Movers, and that really helps a lot. The latency, for those people who don't understand what that is, basically, if I'm playing guitar and Zach's singing, what I'm playing is not going to match up timing wise to what he's singing, because it takes a while for my signal to reach him and vice versa. But they have programs out there that really improve dramatically on that. So it really helps with when you're recording an album and you're all in different places all over the country, or the world for that matter.
And one above that, with the video technology that we're using through StreamYard, it used to pixelate, so you never knew what was going on the other side. But now each individual that's on StreamYard, just for your own edification, it doesn't matter whether you pixelate. We just keep going because you're being recorded local, I'm local, and it merges together. It's really awesome when you think about it. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And then the other thing that we've all learned throughout this is how the remote technologies open the world for people with disabilities in so many amazing ways. Where people were excluded, now they're included.
I mean, that's wonderful. I love how technology can, it could be a blessing. It could also be a curse depending upon how it's used. But there's so much benefit to it. And, I just love something as simple. I mean, it seems simple now, but it wasn't a bunch of years ago. But I have basically my entire record collection in my pocket. And I can listen to whatever I want, whenever I want, at any time. I've got an endless stream of radio stations that I can listen to, of any genre of music. That being said, when we recorded this album, even though we used this streaming technology, we really used a lot of vintage synthesizers and keyboards that were all analog and with oscillators. There's one behind me. I don't know if people are looking at this now, but I would use these old Moogs and old Rolands, where you would have to dial in a sound, dial in different oscillators, and detune them, get this really thick, massive sound, and create a sound that hasn't ever existed before. And then you'd have to play the parts live. You couldn't really use what's called MIDI and put all the notes in, pop them in on a keyboard and then move them around on a grid, tune them, adjust the rhythms later, because you're basically recording, as they used to say, to tape. But yeah, I love the idea of using new technology, but with old vintage gear.
We're talking with Screamin Jack Novak, Fastest Land Animal, the new song next to you, the new single release from East Coast, West Coast, in between. How would you describe Fastest Land Animal if someone was to ask you, what kind of music do you guys record?
It's like it's punk rock with let's say a punk rapping around a pop chewy center. So, like a big influence on the kind of direction I wanted to take with Fastest Land Animals band, like Husker Du is a perfect example, because you listen to those earlier Husker Du tracks and records, and they just sound so abrasive and so almost harsh in a cool way, and really aggressive. They were part of the whole second or third wave of punk called hardcore. Which was even faster and even louder than punk. But underneath that, razor sharp exterior are these really beautifully written, almost like 60s pop nuggets that they were one of the first bands that did. I mean, the Ramones kind of invented all that. They actually invented punk pretty much. So that I just wanted to take that ball and run with it. And that was the kind of idea uh, around this band. And then, of course, the band that pretty much 99.9% of musicians that I know would cite the Beatles as the best band ever and the reason why they got into what they're doing. So the Beatles are always a huge influence on what we're doing. Um, but maybe with this project more the early sort of garagey sounding Beatles.
Got it.
Not so much day in the life at this point.
There's a lot of misunderstanding about the genre of punk rock. I'd like to address that a little bit with you, Screamin Jack Novak. For instance, I was talking to Paul Cookie one time, the Sex Pistols, right?
Well, Cook,
And
yep.
and I was asking him why was it when I was growing up that punk rock was presented at in a way that nobody in the band really knew how to play their instruments, and they just got up there, made a bunch of noise, and whatever came out came out. I think that was a misrepresentation in the media to make it look like it was something uh, really underground, countercultural. I think that is really a misunderstanding about the talent it requires to play that genre of rock. So maybe you can give us a little bit of your take on punk rock and its history in rock music.
Well, I think punk rock, a lot of it was reactionary to what was happening and what was popular in music back then, which was progressive rock. And then, of course, pop and whatever the early days of disco and that kind of thing. But progressive rock, rock had advanced to the point where there were the players and they were on stage and they, people like Rick Wakeman and Steve Howe and even bands like Pink Floyd, like what they could do was aspirational. But you as the listener and the fan, you could go buy a ticket, you can go see them, you can put them on your turntable and listen to them, but you couldn't replicate what they were doing. It was not inclusive. They were just better technically at what they were doing and better at their craft. They were craftsmen, and they were writing songs. Some of these songs. These are the back in the when you were starting out in the business. If you needed to go to the bathroom, you'd put on one of these songs that was 20 minutes long, as the entire side of an album, and then you give yourself a little like mini lunch or smoke break, and then you come back.
Or whatever you're up to. Yeah. Dazed and Confused Live, 27-minute version.
There you go. Like, you can't, as a kid growing up and listening to this music, you can't compete with the Jimmy Pages of the world. You're just not as good. But so I think punk was a reaction, first of all, to stripping the music back down to its basics, 3 chords, almost like 50s music, but let's make it faster and make it more exciting. And then I think the other thing that punk did, and this has to do with you can't play your instruments as well as other musicians can thing, which I agree with you. It's not necessarily true, but there was that breaking down of the wall between the bands and the crowds. Like on any given night, anyone in the crowd would think and probably did say, I'm going to start my own band. And then whoever was in the band that day on the stage, maybe the next night or the next week, that band was in the crowd watching whoever was in the crowd the night they were on stage. So it was all interchangeable. A lot of this started, I think, with Velvet Underground, really seminal band. And was either Brian Eno? No, it was, why am I forgetting his name? He said, producer Todd Rundgren, I think, said only like 50,000, not even 30,000 people, 20,000 people bought the first Velvet Underground record, but every single one of them started a band. So it was that sentiment, I think, that really was the explosion behind punk rock starting. And that's what I love about it. I just love the inclusiveness of it. And when, even to this day, when we're playing on stage, of course, we want to give the best show we can, but I want to feel like the crowds are part of our family and look them in the eyes as, if I could see them, and just make them feel that they're part of the show and as integral to the show as we are.
I think that's totally awesome. And, I look forward to catching you on this tour because now we can get back out there and have fun again. Screamin Jack Novak, Fastest Land Animal. You can go to fastestlandanimal.band to find out what's going on. And we're going to play your brand new song, Next to You. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that before we get into it?
This is our latest single, Next to You. So we were almost done with the album. And even though it's probably not necessary anymore, I love the idea of releasing a full-length, an LP. It's 40-ish minutes of music. It fit really nicely on two sides of a actual vinyl LP, which we always do that. We always have an LP, vinyl LP released of the album. Ours is coming out soon, and we needed one more song just to make it long enough. And we had never recorded a cover. We, occasionally we'll play a cover song live just because it's fun and the crowd loves it. We had never recorded someone else's song live on an album. I'm the principal songwriter in the band, and we were doing all my stuff. So we came up with this idea. Hey, let's do a cover song for this record. And so we started going through. There's all these great punk rock classics, but let's do a song that isn't so on the nose. It's not like I Want to Be Sedated by the Ramones. It's not maybe I Want to, Anarchy in the UK by the Pistols. Something that's more of an album track that people, it's not like we're fooling people into thinking we wrote it, but we're sort of fooling people into thinking that we wrote it, and we're owning this song. And so finally our bass player, Alphonse Castillo, came up with the idea of doing this Police song. It's the first song on their first album, and it's called Next to You. And it's a great song. It fills in all the checks all the Fastest Land Animal boxes. It's hooky. It's fast. It's got like a real punk rock energy. It's just someone else wrote it. And it's not like we're doing Roxanne or Every Breath You Take. We're doing, a deeper track that maybe people will hear it and they'll say, this sounds kind of familiar. I like the song. Wow. So that's how we came up with, and we all really dig the song. So that's why we chose this song, not written by me, but written by a gentleman by the name of Sting.